All right, so today we're here with Rachel Cook at New Day Midwifery. And Rachel, how long you been doing this?
6 years I've been
Oh,
licensed. I've been in the birth world for almost 10.
nice. Yeah, and Rachel just said that before this that she's doing like some days or some months eight mamas having babies.
Mhm.
That's like two over two a week. That's impressive.
Right.
Um, because you guys do long hours, right? I mean, it
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
could be 2 hours. It could be like
They,
24 hours.
yeah, for longer. Yeah, absolutely.
So what kind of got you into this setup with
Uh,
the midwifery?
well, I personally have 3 children. My oldest was born in the hospital with an obstetrician. He was induced because his due date was Christmas Eve, or I'm sorry, New Year's Eve. And she was like, let's just, kind of plan. And I was like, okay, doc, whatever you think.
Huh?
Um, and although my labor and birth went somewhat smoothly, I had a lot of postpartum, hard time postpartum. And
Mm,
so when we had our second, I really wanted to do things differently. And at the time that we had decided to try and find a midwife, I was about 22 weeks pregnant. And in this community at the time, there was only 2 midwives practicing, and both of them were extremely full. So we
wow.
decided to work with a nurse midwife in a hospital. And at the time, again, it was like, oh, nurse midwife, licensed midwife, right? Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
My birth was a little bit harder with my second time around, only because I feel like there wasn't that real trust with my provider.
Mm,
And, and then she came in at the end and caught a baby, and it was beautiful. But again, it was not exactly what I was expecting. I was kind of
yeah.
expecting someone to sort of be there with me in labor. But I do
Mm-hmm.
recall, prenatally wanting to, she'd recommend something to me, and I'd say, let me go do some research. I don't really think that you're thinking about me as an individual, that you're.
Uh,
So
yeah.
with our third, well, it was after my second baby's birth, and he's almost 11, that I started attending births as a doula and supporting people in and out of the hospital. I started birth assisting for midwives at birth centers as well as at
Mm,
home. And that's when I was like, okay, this is what I think I want to do.
yeah.
I'll never forget, I sat down actually with my nurse midwife, and she said something like, well, the good thing about being a nurse midwife in the hospital is that if you don't want to catch babies anymore, at least you can still be a nurse. And for that moment to me was a really big aha moment, because what attracted me to this job was the interpersonal connection and the
Mm,
community building and working with folks on a really personal level, and not just, when I don't want to do this anymore, I'll do this.
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
even though she was trying to talk me into being a nurse midwife, I was like, thank you. That really sets in what I want to do.
Yeah.
So I found out that I got accepted to midwifery school the day before I found out I was pregnant with our third baby.
Mm,
And so there was no doubt about it. Third baby we were having at home.
yeah.
Um, and, although my husband had been a part of our birth and knew all about what to expect, because I'd been talking about home birth like crazy, one of my favorite things about her birth was how elated he was, and how
Mm,
he didn't feel like just someone in the room that everybody just kept moving around, and that he
yeah.
was an actual part of the birth, and that it was an experience that we had together. And he said his favorite moment was, when we are snuggled up in bed with our baby and no one's telling us we're holding our baby wrong. And the midwife was like, okay, see you tomorrow. And he's like, bye. This is awesome. It's so great.
Wow.
There was
Wow.
someone knocking on our door every 2 minutes in the first,
Yeah.
24 hours. It was very, very sweet. And so, and at that time I was in a student midwife. I've had the
Hmm.
opportunity to work with so many phenomenal midwives in this community, as well as up north in Tacoma.
Yeah.
And so I opened my practice in 2015. And I am a solo provider, which means that I am the midwife you get through all of your care,
Mm,
prenatal, birth, postpartum. And I feel like although it's a lot of work, it is so special, because I really get to build these amazing relationships with my clients that it's
yeah.
none other.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you've yeah. I mean, do you have any idea like how many total birth sites you've been to now?
Actually, I do. I track it because I love it. I'm in the high 500s right now, like 582 or
Wow.
something like that. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
It's
So do you
phenomenal.
have any like particular stories that really stick out to you?
Oh, there's so many amazing, beautiful stories. I will never forget, one of my favorite births was a mama who had a lot of anxiety and a lot of trauma just in her life. And her labor was very, very long.
Uh-huh.
But she was progressing a bit slow, but she was progressing. Her baby sounded good and her vitals were good. And she kind of labored all weekend. And she just kept saying, well, I'm okay. I can stay, right? And I'm like, I'm here. I'm here with you. We're good. We took naps. We did shifts. And she ended up having a really beautiful birth that was very triumphant for her,
Wow.
because she kind of had this history that no one ever felt that she finished what she started or anything like that. And it was really amazing. And when she had her second baby came very, very fast. And she was very blown away by like having these opposite experiences. But it was really beautiful for me because of our relationship throughout her care. We were able to identify things in her labor, like certain blocks that she was having related to trauma. And we were able to process certain traumas, almost like therapy, while she was in labor.
Yeah.
And it was because of the way that she trusted me and the way that I knew her body and knew her responses that we were able to work through those without it compounding trauma and actually being a healing experience for her.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
So how do you say for like this woman who was kind of anxious generally? I mean, I think anybody's gonna be anxious. You're creating a human side of you, and then you're gonna bring this human into the world. That would be anxiety, very stressful.
Sure.
Even for like the male or the father. Is it what do you do as far so standard? Just the standard way of going about life in America would be, you go through the hospital setting, and you don't, like, we had our first baby in the hospital, and then the next 6 or 5 at home. But we didn't, the obstetrician that we talked to, 4 or 5 times before, we did not, that's not who was there to deliver the baby when we got there. Just, like some random person, some random doctor shows up. What is your I think a lot of people just need the confidence to know that maybe there's this other option, and it's not just like voodoo, or it's not just some
We're
like
not mixing a cauldron in the middle of the room during visits or
thing.
like that.
Yeah,
absolutely. But we, as midwives, we have lots of experience before we can get licensed. We have to attend 100 births before we can even get our license.
Oh, wow.
And it's a big, very rigorous schooling that is pretty intense, very akin to, nursing school in that sense.
Yeah.
And so by the time we are licensed, we have so much experience under our belts. Washington State really is the golden state for being able to work with a midwife. And a lot of other states are watching our amazing outcomes and what we can do, and are kind of following suit, because not only do we have incredible outcomes, the cost of midwifery care is so much less expensive than the cost of obstetric care. Because in reality, what you're seeing is an expert in low risk and healthy care. And when 70% of the population qualifies as low risk and healthy, it makes no sense that you're sending them all to a high risk provider.
Totally.
All the time. If you roll your ankle and it puffs up and you go and see a surgeon's going to tell you need surgery, right? And so that's one of the things that happens when we have these low risk people, that they have to prove their low risk status constantly. So they're always assumed high risk unless they can prove that they're not. Whereas we, just like we look at, with people that are planning VBACs or vaginal births after cesarean, of course you're going to have a vaginal birth unless something comes up where a cesarean is necessary.
Yeah.
And I tell my clients all the time that I'm not an anti-hospital, anti-epidural, or anti-cesarean practitioner, because I recognize the value of each one of those interventions when used appropriately.
Yeah.
In my practice, the things that may be different than, say, if you were going to go see a doctor, you're going to see me through all of your care. And I recognize that a lot of OB offices, sometimes they will have you see the same doctor throughout your care, and that is better for continuity in prenatal care. But when it comes to the birth, it can be really shocking for people when they've worked with one doctor their whole care and developed a relationship, just to find out that doctor's not even going to be there for this kind of time that they've been waiting for.
Right.
There's that, or you try to see every doctor, so at least you've met them once, but then it creates no continuity, right? And so you don't know anybody, and you're like, oh yeah, maybe I met you when I was 16 weeks, but it was a 5-minute appointment, so I don't know. And so the difference is that being able to see your midwife throughout all of your care.
Gotcha.
Being that I'm also a solo provider and I take a limited amount of people per month. I mean, we can put it in perspective. I take 4 to 8 people per month, whereas the bigger OB practices take 100 to 115.
Wow.
And granted, they are sharing call among 8 or 10 practitioners. But still, it makes it very hard for you to keep people's stories straight and what's going on. And because of that, my clients can call me if they have a concern. If I have a client who is having some spotting at 2 o'clock in the morning and it's keeping her up because she's really worried about it, she can shoot me a text or a call or a picture and say, is this normal? And I can reassure her, or we can get her the care that she needs, as opposed to calling a nurse line to have someone who's she's never talked to before, waiting 4 or 5 hours for someone to call her back just to tell her to pop over to the ER.
Yeah.
And in those senses, it really does save a lot of money for our community as well, particularly for those that are on state insurance, which is something that midwives can take. because a lot of times they're just defaulted to go to the ER. And every time they go to the ER, there's a big bill that the state covers.
Yeah.
There was actually a study that was done several years ago that said that a midwife saved like $500 million every 2 years or something like that. Just in the 1% of people of Medicaid folks that come to midwives.
I believe it. I definitely believe that.
And it's just more personal care. And if you need FMLA paperwork sent out, I'm going to do it. It's not going to be passed through 4 or 5 different channels, and it's not going to take me 3 weeks to get it done.
Yeah.
Some of the other things that are similar is that the care schedule. So you're seen every 4 weeks in your first and second trimester, every 2 weeks in your third trimester. For my practice, for folks that are planning a home birth, I come and do a home visit for them at 36 weeks. And then they're back here in the office every week. So the care schedule, obviously, other than the home visit, is very similar to how you would see your OBGYN. The difference is the visits are longer, and you get to check in with your midwife specifically. We, in Washington State, midwives can order and manage all of the same labs, ultrasounds, genetic screenings, follow-ups, referrals, all the same as if you were seeing a doctor. So some people are a little bit, they're like, oh, if I see a midwife, does that mean I don't get any labs my pregnancy? We do everything the same that we would otherwise be done. We work really closely, particularly in my practice. I have a backup physician that I work really closely with should you have any sort of factors that require additional care or any sort of risk factors that elevate your risk status. I also offer what's called collaborative care. So say, for example, someone during pregnancy, we find out that there's something going on with their blood pressure or their blood sugar, or they have multiples or something like that, where a hospital birth is indicated for their safety. We can still do their prenatal care. They can go to the hospital, have their baby, and then come back into my care postpartum.
Gotcha. So would you go into the hospital with patients?
Yeah, I would say during the pandemic, things have changed a little bit, depending on, support. There was a time where the hospital was only allowing one additional support person. And then they kind of opened it up to where they would allow your doula to come with you. And now, absolutely. I have folks that will hire me as their doula, and I'll be there with them for all of their care. I really like that because I do think that the staff enjoys knowing that their provider is there with them as well, because I know we're on a little bit of a different level, and they're on their best behavior too. And my clients have had really positive hospital experiences. A lot of people seek out midwives because of either a previous negative experience or or just an idea that hospitals are bad. And so if for some reason we need to transfer, they know that their midwife is watching out for them and taking care of them. And if they have a nurse that they don't click with, I can make sure I get that changed for them. And that they're getting the best care possible. And so it seems so overwhelming.
And so when say a woman finds out she's pregnant, when is it best to get a hold of you?
I think as soon as possible is good, as midwife schedules definitely do fill up very quickly. Generally speaking, I will have someone, email me from my website. There's like a little correspondence where they'll say, hey, I just found out I'm pregnant. Can I schedule a consultation? I've been scheduling virtual consultations. We can meet like this, chat a little bit more about my practice. People can see how they feel about me and my personality, and their risk status to make sure that they're low risk enough to give birth out of hospital or work with a midwife. And then we usually schedule their first visit generally between 8 and 10 weeks. And then they have had their labs, and if they want a first ultrasound, they'll have that done prior to coming in. Gotcha.
And is there any kind of checklist you have, or okay, these particular things you should have lined up, or you want to have lined up?
Absolutely.
Prenatal or once you are pregnant?
Yeah, so I have a list that I kind of follow through all of my clients, of things that we make sure we talk about, testing that we address. Before any sort of tests come up, we always, on the visit before, we always talk about it. I usually hand out an informed consent, and I recommend that people do research to find out if that's a test that they want to do. If it's a test that super applies to them. I remember when I had my first baby, I was younger, I was in my early 20s, and the doctor said, oh, you don't need to worry about genetic testing because you're young. But what you didn't know is that I had a significant family history of a couple of chromosomal abnormalities that would have been probably a great idea to have me do that test. And I just went, okay, sure, whatever you say. And every once in a while I'll have a client that'll say, I don't know, tell me what to do. And I'm like, well, let's talk about it. Let's decide what's best for you. And I do feel like because of that, most folks that have babies with midwives tend to feel really ready when they have their baby, because they've already been making all of these decisions for their own body and feeling a partner in their care.
So would you say the majority, for the first timers that come into you, do you feel okay, they're kind of just, confidence isn't there real high, they're not, as far as the
You know,
birthing process, and just kind of
that's a
builds
good
over
question.
time? Or?
I think sometimes I have people that are like, I would say most people that come and see midwives have educated themselves
Hmm.
a little bit more. The
Yeah.
majority of folks I see are either people who have had really poor hospital experiences in the past,
Uh-huh.
or that midwifery care is pretty normal to them, or their friends have had, worked with midwives. I am in this really lucky community. I mean, I always tell anytime I have a student that I have the greatest clients of all time. They really are amazing. And we know that, our community is large, but it's not that large. And a lot of people really know each other, and a lot of word of mouth, and how special it is for me to be able to, work with sisters that are having babies, or cousins, or
Mhm.
sister and brother-in-law. It's so special.
Yeah.
I even just recently had someone where I was her mom's midwife when she had a baby, and then her oldest daughter had a baby later on. It's
Wow.
super special.
Wow.
I've been midwife for my nieces and nephews, and it means everything.
Mm.
I never shake how important and powerful this role is as someone's midwife, because it is a transformative time, whether it's your first or your 10th baby.
Yeah.
And for my first timers that come in, we usually do spend a lot of time talking about what to expect and recommending classes and getting really educated, because knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And a lot of time, particularly with first-time moms or younger moms that are having their first baby, sometimes they just get really kind of trampled over. Like, next, you're fine, you're healthy, you're fine. But there's other things that they need to be taken care of as well during pregnancy.
So you're is there any like books or websites or
I have
podcasts?
a lending library here that I keep for clients. The books that I really recommend are really great starter books are like Birthing from Within.
Mm.
Is a great book where it kind of discusses, the power of a woman's body and what a woman's body can do, and to really trust that throughout the process. There's another one that I really like for partners called The Birth Partner. It is great for doulas. It's great for moms that are going to be at their kids' birth. And it's really great for partners because it gives them tools to help support their partner in labor. And those are kind of the go-tos. And then, there are other books and everything like that. But those are the kind of the starter books that get you excited about doing this.
And so you can, in Washington State, it's okay to do a VBAC?
Yeah, there's no legalities against it.
Okay.
There are, it is something that is not covered by insurance or malpractice insurance.
Gotcha.
And so it's one of those things that is discussed as a family if they want to be out of hospital. It's something that, depending on your risks or why you had a cesarean in the first place.
Yeah.
In most cases in my practice, I work with folks who have had a vaginal birth before. So, for example, I had a mama whose second baby had craniostenosis, and she had a cesarean with her second baby, and then she went on to have 2 more vaginal births. And so when she had her 5th baby, she wanted to be at home, and her risk status was very low for that. She was, she birthed 3 babies vaginally. And
Totally.
so there is more of a cost with that because insurance doesn't cover it.
Yeah.
But that is an option for folks at home as well.
Gotcha. Yeah. So insurance generally here in Washington State is pretty good at covering midwifery.
Yes, which is really lovely. Most state insurances as well as Medicaid. And that's kind of a hats off to the midwives in decades prior, working so hard to get that coverage, because it really does make midwifery more accessible to all, particularly people that have state insurance. It's really lovely to have that option because so many other things are very limited.
Yeah.
The only things I think with home birth that are not covered by insurance, there's a birth kit that you purchase. It's usually about $100, and it has all your kind of boring sterile stuff and postpartum stuff. I joke and say it has your sexy mesh underwear for postpartum and so on. And then there's an assistant fee that covers, because I do bring an assistant with me. And myself and my assistant are trained in neonatal resuscitation as well as CPR. For the birth itself, we bring 4 big bags of equipment. The first is oxygen resuscitation equipment in the event the baby needed any help after birth. The second is our vitals equipment, because we monitor moms and babies the same way they would do in the hospital. We listen to mom's blood pressure and pulse and oxygen saturation and make sure that her body is tolerating labor well. And then we also use a Doppler to listen to baby's heartbeat, because that's how baby tells us that baby's handling contractions well.
Gotcha.
The third bag we carries our homeopathics, our herbs, essential oils, kind of our more natural stuff. The last bag is our pharmaceuticals, and it's maybe one of the reasons why midwifery care is so safe in Washington State. Statistically, it's as safe, if not safer, than being in the hospital for a low-risk, healthy person.
Yeah.
And it's because we carry all the same medications that the hospital would carry to control things like postpartum hemorrhage, allergic reaction, fetal distress. If a woman needed stitches after she has a baby, we can give her that. If she needs IV fluid or antibiotics, those are things that we can take care of at home as well.
Wow.
And so to be able to have that really makes a difference and can prevent big issues before they're even a problem.
Sure. And are there any kind of like, just generally speaking, nutritional insufficiencies or environmental issues or anything that like across the board?
Yes.
Pregnancy, we just
iron tends to be the big one we see. We see people being a little more anemic in pregnancy.
Okay.
And it's a part of that is because of the blood volume expansion that starts at the beginning of pregnancy and kind of continues until a person is, 28 weeks pregnant. It brings their blood volume expansion down, but can drop their iron levels. And so we watch that really closely with labs to make sure every once in a while we have someone that doesn't respond super well to just our regular iron supplementation. And we have to kind of usually work with a naturopath to find out what's going on or how our body's absorbing it.
Gotcha.
We do kind of sometimes focus on like MTHFR issues, as some people can seem anemic and we can be throwing iron at them and it's just not absorbing well. I would say the other big issue that we see is, fatigue and overdoing it. We kind of live in a culture that is told that, pregnancy is something that's just a side thing that happens and you're expected to go. And then after the baby's born, you're supposed to look the same, feel the same, act the same.
Yeah.
So we really want mamas to be, respectful of their body, but also staying active.
Yeah.
One of the things in my practice that we do try really hard to not focus on is weight gain in pregnancy. I feel like women specifically are so focused on, or not just them focused on their weight, our whole culture is focused on their weight. And you walk into an OB's office and they have a thing on the wall that says you're only supposed to gain between 25 and 35 pounds. And heaven forbid you're overweight to start, you should only gain 11 pounds.
Yeah.
That blows my mind. And it definitely sets people up for not a positive experience. And the stress in pregnancy, you throw a pandemic in there, it's huge.
Yeah.
So what I tell people is if you're eating well and you're staying active, I don't care how much your body gains. Because for some people, it is going to be 50 pounds every baby. For some people, it's not.
Yeah.
And for folks that I have that are slow weight gainers, we'll talk about what their protein levels are like or what they're eating, and find ways to get them more, more if they feel like they need it. And, for people that are gaining more, what they'll notice is like every baby, this is how much I gain because my body, that's what my body needs to gain. And again, as long as your diet's healthy and you're staying active, that's fine with us. And for some folks, they don't even weigh themselves at all.
Yeah.
There's ways to measure the health of your baby without stepping on a scale every single visit.
That is definitely a huge one. That's definitely a huge one.
Yeah.
How is it, so say after the woman has the baby, do you have any kind of like protocol as far as the number of days or weeks they should just be like super chill, not be about all that kind of stuff?
Yes. So one of the great things about home birth, so when someone gives birth in the hospital, they generally stay for 24 hours. And that's because there are certain screenings that need to be done on babies that are somewhat time sensitive. And not to mention, if they sent everybody home and then had everybody come back, it would be just a scheduling nightmare. They can bill your insurance more, to stay for 24 hours. And it usually doesn't really cause a very restful time for moms, having someone knock on their door every 2 or 3 hours and waking them up. What we do is we stay with someone for about 4 hours postpartum until their body is stable and baby's stable. And then we come back and see them at their home at 24 hours.
Gotcha.
So in Washington State, midwives can take care of the babies for the first 2 weeks as the pediatric care provider. So we offer the hearing screen, the jaundice checks, the weight checks, the heart defect screening, the newborn screen or the PKU. So we do all of that when we come back and see mamas at 24 hours. Oftentimes we'll come back and see them again at day 3 to 5, which is normally when you would be going to your pediatrician. So again, a mom is allowed to just stay in her bed. We joke and say we want to find her where we left her, which is snuggled up in bed with her baby. And especially it's really helpful for first-time moms that are recovering from childbirth. It's nice to be able to not rush around different appointments. It's also really great for folks that have a lot of kids because then they're not having to lug their kids around to different visits. We see you back in the office generally around 2 weeks, which is when we do baby's second newborn screen, and then take all of your birth and postpartum records and send them to the pediatric care provider. And then we see moms again at 6 weeks.
Gotcha.
So every time we're checking in on babies, we're also checking in on moms. And because we've had this really great relationship throughout care, it makes for a really smooth postpartum time, particularly if we're dealing with any sort of postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression. because they're in a safe space with someone that they know and trust.
Yeah, yeah.
In traditional OB care, you check out of the hospital and then you're not seen again until you're 6 weeks postpartum. And the person that's running postpartum depression screens is the pediatrician who you're trying really hard to impress. And so like, people aren't being really honest with how they really feel.
Wow.
So, you know, when you have someone that'll call you or text you and check in and say, hey, how are you feeling today? How are things going? How can we help assist you? Or get you the resources you need, it really makes a difference.
And do you find that, so I know my wife, she's always big on like her friends and stuff that get pregnant or have had babies and stuff, like you gotta rest, you gotta rest, you gotta rest, you gotta rest. Do you find that that it does make a big difference? Like if you are like just keeping it super low, everybody's doing stuff for you kind of thing for
Yes.
the week, 2
You
weeks.
joke and say the first 3 days you need to be in bed. The following 3 days you need to be around the bed. So the first week is really important to take it very, very easy.
Gotcha.
You know, there's a joke that midwives say that you can choose to recover over several weeks or you can choose to recover over a year. And it's all about how gentle you are on your body to start.
Gotcha.
I do find that one of the hardest parts of our job is, particularly when someone has an unmedicated vaginal birth, you know, they're a little sore the first couple of days afterwards, but then they feel fantastic. And we have to remind them, you just had a baby, it's time to sit down, you know, rest, rest, rest. And it is nice, we kind of rely on partners too to kind of tattletale a little bit. You know, we say, how are you doing? She's like, oh, I've been resting. And he's like, you know, I'm like, all right, take it easy. We joke and say you eat when baby eats, sleep when baby sleeps, do laundry when baby does laundry, you know, just take it easy. There's plenty of time to be doing household chores and being super active. But the gentler you are on your body, the better you will recover in the long term.
Gotcha. So Rachel, what would be like 1 or 2 things for a woman out there right now that's watching this, that's thinking about midwifery or thinking about her whole pregnancy experience? Is there any like nuggets or things that always like just kind of come up and you like to mention?
Yeah, I would say that something someone told me once, I was with her for 3 of her babies, and she said, I wish that more women knew that they deserved better. That they don't have to accept that this is the status quo for care for people, that they, you know, and a lot of people that come to me on their 2nd or 3rd baby, they've said, you know, with my last baby, I thought about it, but you know, I was already with my provider and I didn't want to switch. It's no skin off anybody's back. Like, it's not a huge deal to switch providers, especially if you find yourself toward the end of pregnancy, say you're 30, 32 weeks and you're like, I'm just not feeling good about this. That's about tenfold. And, you know, again, our culture has made birthing a medical problem. Right? Has said, okay, this is something that belongs in a hospital with sick people. This is something that, you know, again, unless you can prove to us that everything's okay, we're going to assume that something bad is going to happen. Now, it's not that you shouldn't be prepared, because we do have lots of conversations about what happens if we go to the hospital, what happens if this happens. And that's why you have a midwife there, right? My job is to be there for the just in case.
Totally.
Most of the time I am taking notes and watching miracles happen. But I think that pregnant people should definitely know that they deserve better care. They deserve to be treated as an individual and to not be kind of herded like cattle, visits and you know, birthing.
Yeah, I think it's huge. It's great insights. Okay, Rachel. So where would a woman or a man or anybody that wants to find out more about you, where would they go?
I think the best place would be to visit me on my website at newdaymidwifery.com. It talks a little bit more about kind of my philosophy. It talks about me. There's also a form that you can fill out and it emails me, and it comes really, really quick. And I'm usually very quick at getting back to you to schedule a consultation. Again, I try to keep my schedule as available as possible, because I think that that's one of the feedback I get a lot from people. It's like, wow, I was able to see you the same week. I didn't have to wait 3 weeks to get in. And it blows my mind that people should have to wait that long, especially, you know, if they've had a history of loss and they want to make sure that their labs are taken to make sure that everything is okay.
Wow.
Midwives work really closely with people's primary carers or their naturopaths, because we want to make sure that, again, collaborative care makes a difference and makes it better for them. So I would say my website is great. You can call me. My number is 360-701-1418. Either way, I'm super available.
Okay, so all that information, the newdaymidwifery.com, everything about Rachel will be below in the show notes. And if you want to check out how to do midwifery or how that process, and you're a pregnant woman or thinking about getting pregnant, you definitely want to check out Rachael.
Thank you.